Hello, hello. We are back for another session at Legends of Lightning here, and I am with two amazing people. One of them you have met from last week, Giacomo Zucco, and
Hello.
hey, you're back again. And
Yeah.
we got Aljaz here in the building, the Bitcoin Chad, the Lightning Network Chad.
Hola.
Since everyone at this point definitely knows who Giacomo is, Aljaz, maybe you could give us a little introduction.
Yeah. I just want to say that I'm basically a Twitter troll, so that's everything you have to say about me, and it's already done. Now we
No,
can
no,
go to
no,
Alex.
no, that is not the case. Giacomo is doing some amazing works over in Switzerland and has an amazing career in the space. If you want to know a little bit more, we get into that at in our previous Meet the Judges panel last week. We streamed last week Friday. No, he's doing some amazing work. And someone else who's doing some amazing work in the space is Mr. Aljaz. A lot of people have difficulty saying your name, I think.
Yeah, I'm quite surprised that over the years you've gotten it quite good.
Yeah, Aljaz does have a jazzy sound to it, though.
Yeah, definitely.
Tell us a bit about yourself.
Besides working on Bolt.Observer, I dabble in many things, Lightning and Bitcoin, Noster, things like that. And I guess I'm on this panel because I'm your last default call when you need somebody to drop in a presentation.
No, that's not the case at all. You were the first option, actually, for this panel, along with Giacomo, because you guys know so much about the state of Lightning itself. And I'm going to be a bit of an idiot here because I understand things on the application layer a lot more than I do on the protocol layer and on liquidity side of things, which is super important for like scaling Lightning, right? And not to mention, you also are running Bolt.Observer. You're the chief of directories in the space, from what I understand. Lightning Landscape, Noster.net. Come on, man. Do I have to do this for you?
You forgot the DLC.wiki and lightning-network.tech.
Oh, well, I didn't know about the last one. I guess that's you. Can you shed some light on those projects as well, please?
Well, Lightning Landscape was a project which you were also involved in. Essentially, we wanted to paint a larger picture of what's happening in Lightning and gather all the projects, companies, and make them essentially a browsable directory of sites and everything where you can figure out what's happening in monitoring, or which companies are building something in liquidity space, or where you can spend sets and things like that. So essentially creating a portal for people to learn more about Lightning and discover new stuff that they might not be aware of, because it started as me just collecting some bookmarks like all my directory projects usually do. But at some point, as I'm sure we will touch on this conversation, like Lightning space became quite huge and lots of developments are happening. So it's impossible to follow it careful, even if you essentially dedicate your life to it. So that's why we created the site where people can actually discover new things and also update their projects, things like that. So to make it easier for labs looking for a new tool, or I don't know, VCs trying to evaluate the opportunity in the certain space.
Definitely, definitely. So that people should definitely check out the project lightning-landscape.net. It's
Net,
.net.
yes.
Yes, I should know this. Yeah, I guess like when we were presenting this in El Salvador, I think what Alex said was that what happens on the Lightning Network on the protocol side, on the network side, it's all invisible, mostly invisible, right? So what's the other layer of metrics and stuff that we can use to figure out, like, is this thing growing? And on that note, I'm going to pull up your slides here, Giacomo. There
Yeah,
we go.
thank you.
The state of Lightning. So let's go on.
So just to be clear, these slides are not up to date. These are the slides that I presented during the Lightning Summit of Viareggio the last spring. The next spring will be a new Lightning Summit in Viareggio, and I will make the effort to actually update the slides. But now we can still use these non up-to-date slides in order to discuss a little bit. I will go very quickly through them to explain what was my perception of the state of the Lightning Network back 6 months ago. And then we can probably discuss a little bit about what changes and what didn't. So first of all, I changed split the topics between unimportant stuff and important stuff. Unimportant stuff, I decided it was basically payment user experience. So the user experience for people trying to pay. Payment privacy, which is separated because people don't care for privacy in the immediate, but eventually they will. Fund security, so how easy it is to lose money on the Lightning Network, and the convergence over open standards. So the fact that everybody can just integrate into the same things instead of just spreading around and diversifying. And then the important stuff instead are non-stop bike shedding over terminology, acronyms, symbols, icons, fonts, and color palettes, which was basically a joke, but I go into that a little bit at the end of the presentation. So payment UX, basically, I divided it in these 4 categories. The first category is the capacity to abstract between layer 1 and layer 2. So it's very confusing for users that usually don't even exactly understand why they are receiving or spending Bitcoin to distinguish between receiving Bitcoin over Lightning or not. So there is a lot of work to be done in abstracting away this fact. When you open a browser, you don't know if you are connecting to a server using the IP directly, or if you have already opened a TLC stable connection with it. It's all abstracted away. You just know that you have to get to some point, and the distinction between internal layers is completely opaque to you. We are not there yet. There are like second generation Bitcoin wallet, Lightning wallet like Breeze and Phoenix are getting there a little bit. Now basically, or Moon in a certain way, but in the opposite way. Like Moon is always on chain and it pretends to be off chain, and like Breeze and Phoenix, they're always off chain. You don't have an on chain balance. Basically, it's not really abstracted. It's just like forced to only stay on one layer. The second point would, well, actually, another good point of abstraction is John Carvalho's synonym startup doing BitKit, where you can actually have just a slide. This slide is how much you want spending versus saving account versus spending account. So you don't use the terms like Lightning. You just go between what you need for saving and what you need for spending, and then the app should be able to automatically assign. The second point is exactly automation between these 2 layers. So the point where when you try to pay somebody on Lightning, but you cannot pay on Lightning for various reasons, instead of just failing, the the wallet will try to open a channel on the flight with the other party, and so you will have you will receive some kind of alert in which the wallet is telling you that the speed of confirmation may change because now or the trust assumption may change because now you are basically using a different kind of layer, so the alert will not be failed, but we are moving from speed to something slower or more trusted in the meantime. And this is connected with, in general, failure management. Failure in Lightning Network is impossible to understand for users. Like even just now, when recently I was in Riga, I was using the Bolt cards to pay for food, and it was failing. And with the PTC Pay server guy, we were not able to understand what was happening. What was happening was that I was trying to pay slightly more, like $1 more than the content of the Bolt card, and I didn't get it, and nobody got it for like 20 minutes. So failure management is pretty good on Bitcoin base layer because there is no failure there unless you can't open the wallet, and that's a serious failure. Or if you can pay, you will just have like confirmation wait times, but that's something that is already basically somehow managed by UX. In Lightning, failure is very bad because nobody knows why you're failing yet. It's very hard to parse the reason of the failure. And then the most important thing, which is the fourth, the UX for people that is getting offline. So if you're getting offline and you have to get back online, for example, with Breeze, every time you go back online, you have to wait for this like very slow sync of your neutrino node. Now with the new Breeze connected with Greenlight, that's better. You don't have that anymore, and it's still non-custodial. If you want to receive while you are offline, right now people are using custodian solution like Albi custodial or Wallet of Satoshi. Why? Because you are offline when you receive tips, because you don't know that you are receiving a tip. So it's very hard to phone your phone in order to wake it up in order to receive. So people are not using custodian Lightning in general. They are using sometimes custodial Lightning, but especially for stuff like tips, it's impossible to do otherwise unless you have a very serious node setup that you can connect with. It's impossible to do with retail mobile apps. There are some news about this as well, because like recently there was a full analysis of the situation by Roy of Breeze during the Riga conference Balticon Badger. So he made a full review of the state of the offline asynchronous payment. So how can we do Lightning asynchronous trustless payments without custodians? That's possible with the LSP, but it's not done yet. So it still has to be done. Then there is, well, this is basically different kind of things that happen in Greenlight, and the adoption of Bolt 12 offers can actually help a little bit. Slash tax and slash pay can also help with this stuff. And some people are trying to use Nostr, but there are many things going on. Unified QR for Bitcoins. Async payment is starting to come along a little bit. And this is the UX from BitKeep. You see spending and saving and just slide between one and the other. And that's a UX that probably users can understand instead of managing an on-chain address list and an off-chain channel list. So now we go to payment privacy. Well, Aljaz, do you want to like stop? Maybe it's better if we discuss this first part, so the payment UX, and then we move on. Are you okay?
Yeah. I think we could just use it as like the sections for the discussions and stuff. Aljaz?
Yeah, I'm just trying to ingest everything that Giacomo dumped, even though I remember that I once heard this presentation, but slightly hungover, so it didn't really stick with me.
It was early in the morning also, so
Yes,
it was hard for everybody.
No, but
Go on.
I definitely agree on all the points, especially the abstraction part. My pet peeve in the industry is when I hear somebody say Bitcoin Lightning, like it's a different Bitcoin than on-chain Bitcoin. I just want to slap people. Like we need to get rid of these things. And yes, people thinking about, oh, do I have this on-chain, or how can I pay this? This just needs to be abstracted away, because despite many people in the space having the opinion that you need to know everything about Bitcoin before you are good enough to use Bitcoin, that's just stupid, because we will never get anywhere with that mentality. And it's the same as you mentioned before the presentation, John. It's like things that on protocol level being hidden away, but that's kind of the point. Like Lightning will succeed when nobody talks about Lightning anymore, essentially. Lightning needs to be in the background. It's like you're not thinking about TCP/IP, as Giacomo said. You're just opening Facebook or Twitter or whatever.
Yeah, I think some of these abstractions that we've explored in the Bitcoin design community, for example, is to, or at least with some of the research that I was doing a few years ago, was to come up with like different like patterns and things that I feel a bit more familiar to like the users of money, I like to call them, like the rest of the world who definitely use money, but they expect certain things with their payment applications, right? These modern neobanks and stuff like that. For example, selecting from a list of contacts, et cetera, et cetera. And John Carvalho speaks quite a bit on this as well. But one point that you mentioned there was about this offline kind of like receive. Are there any solutions besides custodial and have a node running on like some hardware at home, which not many people have that option for, right? Or can like put that cost into?
Yeah, there are solutions, and they are coming, but they are slow. These slides were just commits a few days before. Well, actually, one is in December, but anyway, it's going on. If you go on the live stream or Riga Balticoni Badger and you just look for Roy's presentation, you will have a better understanding. But to make it short, long story short, basically, we have two ways. One way is very clean, very good, very nice, but it doesn't have proof of payment, so you cannot prove that you paid asynchronous unless we move from HTLC to PTLC. So it will require a Lightning protocol change. Lightning protocol change doesn't mean base layer protocol change, so we don't need any kind of soft fork, but it's a hard change that we want to do anyway from hash lock time contract to point, elliptic curve point lock time contract. Is a change that will take time. It's being discussed since like 4 years, 5 years, and will take time. There is no need for consensus like a fork, but there's need to upgrade the whole network. Like routing is completely different, so it needs an upgrade. If we get that, we can have a very good solution that initially Roy called Lightning Rod, which is a very cool name, but it's now called just async payments. This is a very neat solution. In between, until we don't get this change of protocol, we can have this without proof of payments, which probably sucks because for tips, maybe I can tip you, but I can never prove that I tipped you, which may be okay because it's a tip. But for any kind of real payment, that's really, really insufficient, probably. Another option is to do like what Roy calls like wake up call. So we need some kind of capability for the apps to wake up your local node in your phone in order to pay you a tip, which is, assuming you are not out of battery or in a place where there is no signal, maybe can kind of work, but it's very, very bad. So probably what we want is this final solution here.
You mentioned also another option, which was Greenlight, which Breeze is kind of like migrating to their mobile app. Besides the node running fully on the, on the device, this seems like the ultimate scaling solution.
Yeah, it is. Like it's not really about scaling, but it's mostly about security, ultimately censorship resistance, because you can't just use custodian solutions for Lightning. Some would argue that for a small amount is not even that a big deal, because small amounts will not be confiscated easily because they're small, so they don't matter, and they will not be rug pulled easily because they're small. But still, it's better to always go for sovereignty as much as we can to push in that direction. Then some trust at the margins will always be there, but we should not aim for trust as an ingredient. So Greenlight is great because it's an LSP basically, but it's an LSP that does everything for you except for key management. So you keep your keys, you sign your transaction, you cannot get your funds stolen, but everything else will be done, including routing. Like it's LSPs are already doing things like trampoline node, watchtower for you and stuff, and facilitating liquidity, like with a hub and spoke design, so they're well connected for you. Greenlight is like doing everything that is necessary to do a proper. Let's imagine the experience you have in Phoenix. It's great. Phoenix UX is comparable to a custodian UX. Basically, it's almost comparable to Wallet of Satoshi, but it's entirely self-sovereign. The only problem is that there is just one provider, which is a Senk. So Greenlight is an attempt to go kind of there, but with an open source backend that everybody could run in theory, and you can have several of them.
But there's Greenlight Greenlight doesn't provide liquidity by itself. They provide the infrastructure, and then Breeze provides the liquidity, which is a better model, because with the open LSP standard that Breeze is doing, you can have as many LSPs as you want. And with the LSP spec thing that we've been desperately trying to put together, we're aiming to exactly that, have a standard above the standards, if you will, for the applications to actually talk with each other and enable people to have decision power and not necessarily need to trust one single entity.
Absolutely. The best model, finally, and we'll talk a little bit about the open LSP specs, but the best model will be a model in which your phone app manages the keys and also has several LSP you can choose from, maybe even in at the same time. So if you have one channel that is not operational right now, you can use the other. And when one LSP collapses and doesn't serve you anymore, your closure can be already splicing into another channel with another LSP. So that would be the best case scenario. We're still a little bit far away, and the work that you guys are doing is fundamental, because right now LSP is a concept that emerged just from the practice of the market and not from the theory of lighting. So now we have a lot of different ways to do an LSP, and probably Greenlight, let's say Greenlight is probably a good model for a complete LSP with some other probably some other additions.
Yeah, definitely. Especially now that splicing has become a thing. So that's why Phoenix can now be a comparable experience, because you don't end up with 100 channels with 20K sets. So that will be, I think, a game changer long term for combined with Greenlight or anything similar that comes up.
Agreed.
Yeah, I think one of the big questions around that, though, is that can Breeze or people using Greenlight, the Greenlight host, can they see like all your payment information, and you end up in a situation where you're getting censored, right? That's a little lead in there for you, Giacomo.
Yeah, exactly. So I can finally go to the point 1.2, which is about privacy. So privacy is a problem that right now user will not feel, but eventually becomes very, very important. So the distinction I do here are basically between L2 versus L2 privacy. So privacy of routing and paying within the Lightning Network. So basically things like probing attacks, or things like time correlation attacks, or HTLC correlation attacks and stuff like that. In that regard, I think that we are already pretty good, in the sense that an active attacker can reduce your privacy, can try to de-anonymize you on the Lightning Network, but it needs a lot of active work. So compared to the layer one, where an attacker can just load the node and then see all the previous transaction of Bitcoin of everybody forever, and they can apply any kind of heuristics. In this case, they have to be active and proactive. They have to buy, first of all, the attacker must buy Bitcoin. Now they must put Bitcoin on the Lightning Network. They have to help the network by routing payments, and now they can try to make a failed payment in order to probe. They can try to correlate timing. They can try to correlate HTLC, but they have to be participants in the network. And as much as the more the normal, sane, healthy network grows, the harder it is for the attacker to keep up. So this kind of L2 to L2 can be improved, like PTLC that we were discussing before will help these. The other thing would be like trampoline nodes with, I think I mentioned here some possible improvements. Like we have payment secrets, route blending, the use of Tor, like the use of Tor instead of the OpenNet. Now that Tor is back to being usable again, because for a while people were closing down Tor Lightning nodes because Tor was completely unusable for almost a year. So this was a real problem.
I think Tor is still one of the big problems of Lightning Network, because for anything else than an edge node from which you just pay and occasionally receive, like, you don't want to route through most of the Tor nodes, because just from the statistics that we've done at Bolt.Observer, like, if you have one or two Tor nodes on your path, like, you get orders of magnitude in latency, and it's just not scalable to an extent that we would like to grow the network. I think in the long term, we will need to find some alternative solution, or insane amount of resources will need to be poured into Tor to make it usable.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Aljaz, just to take a little step back for people who might not understand like the relationship between Lightning and Tor, could you just spend a few seconds just explaining that part as briefly?
Majority of users run their Lightning nodes on Tor, so especially if they run them at home on the Raspberry Pis, which is whole new other thing that I don't want to get into it right now, but they use Tor, so they don't leak their IPs where they are, etc. And also it makes it easier to access your node from anywhere. You don't need to really care about firewalls and anything. But the way Tor works is it does onion routing similar than Lightning does onion payments, or the way it's constructed. But the problem is that Tor has been DDoSed since it existed. It's reliably slow. And latencies are huge. You get drop connections. So this is not, when you describe a network like this, it's not something that you want in your payments. Like, you don't want to look at the barista and, oh, I'm routing through Tor. Maybe it's going to take 5 attempts and 5 minutes to pay for this fucking coffee.
Yeah, and one of the important parts here you highlighted, if like someone's running a node at home on a Raspberry Pi or whatever other device or old computer or something, your IP address has to be affiliated with the node and visible on the network, right? So this is one of the reasons why people use Tor, so that your IP address has location data in which they can now, someone can see that, oh, there's like 1 Bitcoin sitting in this home device. Maybe I should go pay them a visit,
Plus, your IP address is one step removed from your residence. Basically, everybody can just call an internet service provider and basically get your IP, unless you're using a VPN. But then the VPN can be an honeypot, so it's not an easy problem to solve.
And I think that's a point that is not discussed enough in Lightning. We're talking about L1, L2 privacy and receiving privacy, but the point is that IP address is still the most sensitive part of the whole node in terms of privacy and anonymity. And I think long term it would be great if we could figure out a way not to use IPs by default when exposing this, or maybe migrate to some other way of communicating everything that's needed. But that's another long conversation to be had.
Yeah, it's connected though, because for example, the reason that later on I divide receiving privacy from routing privacy is that senders in Lightning Network already have a pretty good privacy right now. Like, if you are sending money over Lightning, you have very often you have better privacy than on chain, without doubt. If you receive, it's a little bit more nuanced, because when you receive, you have to expose basically, unless you use it receiving trampoline, blinder routing, you are exposing your node IP basically. So now either you're using Tor, but then you have all those problems, or using ClearNet, and so the payer knows where you are basically. And that's even worse for routers, because now routers, they have to have announced public channels, because otherwise people cannot use them to route. And so they have to tell everybody their node ID, which also includes an IP if they are not using Tor or a VPN. So it's very bad. So I would say for senders, privacy is good. For receiver, it's kind of bad. And for routers, privacy right now is tragic. Would you agree?
Yes, absolutely.
So here I put well, this is kind of complex. If you are interested in this crazy diagram, you can watch this video that's called Lighting Hack Day Istanbul February 26, where it's on my channel. If you look for my Giacomo Zucco channel, the quality of sound is bad, but it should be understandable. Then again, well, here discuss RGB a little bit, because if RGB was used on Bitcoin, it could help privacy a lot, but it's not the case yet. And payment URIs with these optional parameters that can include blinding. Sorry, okay, blinding rules. This is actually, this is going on, so this is improving. Okay, this is good. So touching Aljaz's point, there is some discussion about adding I2P instead of Tor. This is not necessarily a full solution. There are many other trade-offs that will come instead. We don't have anything better. Like we have mixed nets like NIM. The problem is that NIM also includes the shitcoins, which brings along all the incentive problems that come with shitcoin ICOs. So many people are excited about NIM. I'm very skeptical that anybody issuing a token can make something work as a general heuristic, but let's see. And in general, there is this strange idea that we are using the internet with an anonymization, with an onion routing stuff on top, in order to route Lightning transaction that include an onion routing within, which may not be the most rational design overall. So I agree with Aljaz that this part should probably be completely reinvented, and I'm not sure it will happen very soon.
Yeah, the very soon is definitely something that doesn't look like it.
And okay, so the other part is fund security. So first is backup on layer one, basically backup on layer one. This seems like obvious, like okay, backup for Bitcoin layer one is solved problem, but it's not. Like try to backup. For example, I use BIP 85 for most of my backups. So I just use one mnemonic to derive other mnemonics. I cannot do that easily on a node with Lightning LND, because they will use a different encoding, and I cannot do that definitely for Core Lightning, because they do this freaking HSM file. I have like 3 different nodes that collapsed, and now I didn't back up my mnemonic because there was the HSM file. Now I have to somehow resurrect them in order to look inside Dockers where this file is. This is very bad for me. Maybe it's for somebody else, it's easier, but I hate this kind of different non-standard backup schemes for Lightning, which goes even worse when you move from L1 backups to L2 backups, so the backup of the states. That's basically an unsolved problem. So the only reason backups work for now is that nobody really has to use them, because LSPs are keeping them from you and they don't try to scam you. But if like a real punishment transaction happened more often, if this situation was stressed in Lightning, everybody will lose a lot of money. So this is an open problem. There's not a trivial solution to on the current Lightning. Probably the solution would be to move on stuff like L2 or Lightning Symmetry, where you have actually an easier backup.
But not just that. I think the backup part is also a problem of implementations itself, because, like, I don't know, LND's design is just designed against backup and sane policies. There's very well-known practices how to scale software. We just, as Bitcoiners, we like to reinvent everything and forget all the best practices. So it's been 5 years of Lightning. We still don't have like LND that supports Postgres or some relational database backend where you can export things or have redundant servers, things like that. Backups are very simple if you use actual sane things. Like Lightning is not the only thing that needs less states. That problem has been solved in IT for a very long time. It's just that we need to actually stop shit posting so much on Twitter and maybe focus a bit on more enterprise side of things and make the software enterprise grade, maybe pluggable to something that resembles a good solution for backups, redundancy, failovers, things like that. And then that solves some of the problems. Of course, as you said, like L2 or other solutions would help with that immensely, but even having some better options in terms of tooling would already make this significantly easier.
Agree, even if that will help, especially LSP backups and service backup, while the single user with the phone will still be like completely on like under the protection of the LSP. So what will probably help there as well will be still the open LSP specs, because in that case you could use one LSP as your main liquidity provider, the other as watchtower, and the other as backup helper. So you are not trusting the same entity to do all the three functions.
Yeah, exactly. It's definitely more solution for routers, LSPs, things like that, versus the end user solution, because you can't really run the whole enterprise stack on a Raspberry Pi.
Yeah, or a phone, like or on a phone app, exactly. And so moving on, like again, there are some things B25. Yeah, anyway, let's move to the last series slide that was about standards. And well, I think the most important news here is exactly what Aljaz already mentioned, which is the open LSP standard. There are other things that I was taking a look at, but that's actually the most important thing. Here I was discussing the standard is the proliferation of non-Bitcoin kind of network, like there is /tags, which is part of All.Punch, and there is Nostr, which is in some relationship with TBD and Web 5, but there's a lot of, everybody's reinventing everything basically. Identity network, Web of Trust, the domain name services, everything is being reimplemented and reinvented crazily. This is basically all about standardization. When do you think that the first active implemented example of open LSP spec could be seen in the open, like 2024, or that's impossible?
No, I mean, theoretically, you already have the Open LSP spec live, because Breeze does support alternative LSPs for the wallet. So that's already done. With the LSP spec thing is, we kind of deprecated the previous version that was done. So now we're reinventing the wheel, as we like to do. But I hope that will be finished in, let's say, couple months, so we can have the first. There's parts of it already implemented in LDK, so there will be at least the channel request version should be live soon. TM.
So, Johns, you know he's not lying, because when developers lie, they say 2 weeks. He said 2 months, so that's way more realistic.
Of course. You know, I was thinking about what you guys were talking about, the backups as well, because that is something that's kind of curious. Why hasn't that been spec'd out originally for all the implementations to follow a similar spec? Because this seems like something that increasing the switching cost between node implementations, and henceforth will probably harm the decentralization of the network, no? Because you have you feel that it's too difficult for you to move away from the implementation that everyone has learned about and stuff, not to mention the funds and the key management that you'll have to set up again.
Yeah, I think that originally the Lightning Network didn't have a very clear target. Like, is this going to be run by every kind of Bitcoin user, or by only like professional operators? And now we have this kind of division between final users and LSPs, where the final users are still sovereign with the keys, but they are depending. And this was not clear at the beginning. It's like two-tier network was not very clear. The initial imagination was everybody will run a Lightning node somehow, but everybody will be super expert enough to manage this super complex backup without using the standard enterprise method. So yeah, it was, I think, people were focusing on the design of the network and not on the user experience of backuppers.
Yeah, because we definitely come to a point where choosing an implementation is the ultimate vendor lock-in. Like you as an LSP or a big routing node, the cost is pretty huge if you wanting to switch from LND to CLN, even though many people would like to, but the opportunity cost is huge, and especially with high on-chain fees, etc. But that would, I think, also significantly change the market shares of implementations if people could easily switch around. And I truly hope that we get to some point to that scenario, because I think, like, not only like you presented, yeah, we have the open standards and everything, but we're already starting to quite differ between implementations. Like Bolt.12 is a great example of how things are very aligned in the industry. Like, yes, Lightning Labs now is doing the separate daemon, like whatever, like that's not going anywhere, or even if it will be, it's not the way to do it, because each implementation has a company behind that has different priorities. Also, like AMP was ultimately implemented by LND. Now we have liquidity ads that's only in CLN, things like that. So the network is already becoming quite diverse in the advanced features or features that we would like to see. And I think that's not that great in the long term, because the more incompatibility we bring in, the more random other stuff needs to be built around the UX and everything, because now your wallet will need to figure out, oh, does your destination support this way of payment, or this Bolt 11, Bolt 12, or trampling routed blinding and things like that. So I think we need to focus a bit on maybe keeping things aligned slightly better, or at least get new implementations that have, so that the market share of current ones gets a bit diluted, and then the competition starts to solve that problem.
Yeah.
Totally agreed.
I would like to, Giacomo, I know you have a couple minutes left, so I want to like bring this all back and together to Legends of Lightning, right? We have a bunch of makers. Some of you guys are still trying to figure out what is it you're going to build. Maybe you have a deeper understanding of like some of the components and problems of the Lightning Network as it stands. What opportunities are there for builders now? Maybe Giacomo, you could highlight some of them. We did talk about, I'm going to make it difficult. We did talk UX last week, right? Now we discussed like some specific problems. Are there ways in which people in this hackathon can potentially target that? Here's one, for example, just quickly. So we did have someone who was working on this thing called Intranet, not Indra, and they were trying to solve the privacy problem. I can't remember exactly the full details, but I do remember that they were doing some kind of like a VPN kind of thing to protect people's IP addresses on the Lightning Network. But yeah, what opportunities for builders?
I mean, we discussed the NIM, which is a mixed net with the shitcoin. You can do something like that without the shitcoin. You can create a mixed net where the relevant incentivization is done via Lightning payment. Of course, there is some kind of recursion problem, because before you can actually pay somebody to be mixed, you have to mix your payment in order to be private. But it's solvable, in my opinion. And the other thing that we were discussing was standards. Instead of recreating something from scratch, try to take a good standardization effort and try to implement something that follows the standard, for example. Of course, realistically, for a hackathon, you don't really want to be binded by specification. You want to be probably free and more experimentative. But still, it's very important that eventually you try to follow standard and not to reinvent new standards every time. Unfortunately, I have to run. I can just leave you with the jokes that are the last slides. So basically, I moved from the unimportant stuff to the important stuff. That is basically the unit of account. So I discussed the fact that stats is a standard against the fight with bits, but we will talk about this more in the Lugano forum with Jimmy Song and Adam Beck. And then the symbol for sets. And I made the joke that there are two options. One is not great because it's cultural appropriation for our Turkish friends because it's a kebab, and the other one is not great because it's cultural appropriation to our German friends. And with this very politically correct slide, I finished my talk in April.
I did not see
Anyway,
that one coming.
that was good. I know. And there were a lot of German people in Viareggio, so it was very funny. I mean, German people, they don't laugh very loud, but some of them were smiling a lot. Guys, with this politically correct end, I really have to run, and looking forward to chat again soon.
Thank you
Bye,
so much,
guys.
Giacomo. Thank you so much. Ciao, ciao.
Bye.
Oh wow, that was fantastic.
Yeah, that's the only slide that I remember that I saw in
That's
Lugano.
what, sure. All right. Well, like in the next few minutes, I would love if we could like extend some of those examples. So we got a mixnet, like NIM without a shitcoin. Now these are like quite some ambitious projects here, but hell, let's put them out, right? The other one he mentioned was in using one of the standards, pretty much like doing
Yeah.
something with the like. What could you do with them though?
I don't know.
Which ones are available? Sorry.
You could, for example, even though it's a bit too early as we're still doing the finalization of the spec, but you could create open source libraries that implement the LSP spec to help future builders implement that, or things like that.
That's yeah. I think there's also some kind of like opportunities of like I think John Carvalho mentioned this as well. And actually, I just see, you know, it's kind of smart. He says that they're building a company that assumes a post-Bitcoinized world or something like that, like post-Bitcoinization, right? And I think these are one of these elements here. If you assume that everyone is using these tools, then maybe you come up with an idea that is necessary beyond the tools development. So for example, we have the LSP spec now, or it's in development. No one's working on it. But if we can imagine sorry, no one's using it. But if we can imagine a world where Bitcoin is everywhere and this spec is going to drop, what are the things that people need to build in that future, right? What are the tools and platforms and stuff? Like, what does that look like?
I mean, I have pretty strong opinions in that regard, so maybe you've opened a good conversation. But as I've stated several times previously, like paying for coffee is not the killer app for Lightning. So I think we should focus a lot on actually some either solving problems where they already exist, or some novel use cases. So for example, value for value is a novel use case because that wasn't possible before. Like you can't send tiny fractions of a dollar, you can stream that, etc. So that's a novel use case that was only available because, I mean, only possible because you have Lightning. But you have the other side of these problems. Like good examples are Satimoto, for example, the the electric vehicle charging app. So essentially, because you have a way of not needing to KYC people to register to 100 apps, you essentially build a technology or an application, a solution that solves your users' problems because Lightning enables you to just accept or send money frictionlessly. And with that, your costs are lower, so you're not paying point of sale point of sale charges or licensing. You don't need you don't get taken a couple percent of your payment provider, things like that. So those are things that should be built upon. Like Lightning is digital money, or Bitcoin is digital money, and Lightning's primarily win will be in digital space, not physical space. Like I don't hate paying for goods in real life, like the NFC with Visa or whatever. It works, like it's fast. You don't have a problem with it generally. Versus paying something online, it's, oh, do they support PayPal? Oh, what's this? Or I can't pay just for this article. Or like, oh, I need to input my credit card to all the shady sites that I might be ordering stuff from, and things like that. So there's a lot of things that can be significantly improved in an online experience with Lightning. So I think that's things that we should be, as an industry, trying to focus on more, instead of just trying to replace the current brick and mortar payments and merchant solutions, because that's a very hard sell. I guess Giacomo mentioned in Riga, Bolt cards didn't work. I mean, they worked, but then they didn't. And it's just a complicated experience. And currently we have lots of hackish solution. And I mean, the Bolt card is a very good piece of tech, but it still lacks certain things. And these things will need time to mature and to build out. Well, you don't have an authentication. Like if you're paying with your debit card, you have a PIN. You need to authorize, versus on a Bolt card, you just go there and pay, which is very simple, but also very horrible if you lose the card, for example, and things like that. I mean, I think there is a project now that actually added some PIN capabilities to the cards. But my point is that the digital realm is where Lightning can really shine right now, versus trying to solve all the world's problems at once. Because when you solve an actual problem to people, then people actually might get Bitcoin into their hands. And then over time, okay, I have this thing that I keep paying with online, what's happening? Then you also, maybe those people want to spend it somewhere, and there's going to be a demand, because currently we're all trying to convince our favorite pubs, oh, you need to accept Bitcoin, and like bugging them for a year, but then they get 3 Bitcoin payments a year. Or maybe the Bitcoin conference is in town and there's a lot of payments for a week, but then nothing, because people who have Bitcoin don't generally like to spend it that much. And people who don't have Bitcoin won't go buy Bitcoin to pay with Bitcoin. Like
That's fair. That's fair.
So like, we need to solve problems of real people as a way
In the digital
to
space.
yes, as a way to actually show what this technology can do and what's possible.
So one of the examples for solving problems in the digital space, just before we wrap up here, is these API payments, right? L402 and LSAT, etc. What's your take on that? And is there a space for this? Is it designing too into the post-Bitcoinized world? Is there a demand for something like this, especially given your background, and
I would love to think so. Like, I'm very bullish on machine-to-machine payments, but I don't think we're like there yet. Like it's not happening in the next 6 months. Like OpenAI will not just magically adopt the L402 for payments or things like that. But it's an interesting space to explore, and I'm definitely more than just trying to fit this into existing companies. Is we should think what the technology itself enables us to create that wasn't previously possible. Because I think we're at a point where internet was in 95. Like we're still at a phase where we're just trying to port a phone book to the internet, or like paying for coffee to to Lightning. But we need to actually, we don't know what we don't know, or because we can't imagine the future, we can build the products for it, or what the technology will enable. So I think we need to cross that chasm to actually start coming up with novel ideas that weren't possible before.
I guess this is a great opportunity for any designers listening in. I see Christoph there from the Bitcoin design community. And design is definitely one of those areas in which you can, like one of the things that you can use, those tools that you can use to imagine the future without constraints. So perhaps some of you guys listening in might want to do some design workshops together, just like post some like crazy ideas of what you think a post Bitcoinized world would look like. I think Bitcoinized sounds a lot like balkanized. I think I'm saying that wrong.
There's nothing wrong with Balkans.
Yeah, no, yes, but the Balkan. Oh, don't do this to me now. You're not gonna cancel me. No, but that's very true, and I think that's a very strong point in what you're saying there. With the coming up with more novel approaches, and it's true, we don't know what's going to stick yet. There is also commentary about value for value. Is it, like a normal mechanism? Is it like the incentives aligned, and is it something that could be sustainable for the content creators and stuff? But we're still very small in this industry. To expand out of it, we kind of need to come up with these novel things and see which one sticks. Ultimately,
yeah. Or on the other hand, we can go solve the very existing problems of companies, which is like cash flow management, because Lightning in essence is a settlement network. And yes, it's a very boring problem for people because they want to save the world, have a very fancy talk on a conference, or nobody's tweeting about cash flow management.
What do you mean by this? What do you mean by cash flow management?
Or just optimizing payments for the industry? Like, for example, take Sinota, for example. They are they're minimizing risk by settling bills from energy bills from miners faster, because Lightning, in theory, you can stream the money. So that means your counterparty that's selling you something can get the money instantly instead of in 30 or 60 days, which is a common practice in businesses, which means that there's a lot of, you essentially with Lightning, you can improve velocity of money, which means that there's a lot more money circulating around. There's smaller capital demands on companies because things are happening faster. You are not risking that somebody you sold something to will go broke before they pay you, or bankrupt, or whatever. So those are essentially kind of boring problems for people to solve. It's not, oh, you're not streaming money to listen to a podcast or doing API calls for your AI robot. No, but you're essentially solving a very, very big problem that every industry essentially has. And if that's a completely different way to essentially put companies into Bitcoin, because it's not, oh, you need to manage your treasury and get some Bitcoin in as a hedge against inflation, etc., etc. No, like you're currently using X. Now we can solve your problems. We can improve your margins or lower your risk by using this technology. And it's not about Bitcoin. It's not about what you're using. It's actually providing value through a better settlement network.
I think dropping some gems. I wish I had a soundboard to do like some foghorns and stuff like that. That was amazing. Wow. Okay. Like, are there any other similar kinds of problems whilst you're on this roll?
I already gave you two.
Okay, fine. We'll clip this up.
No, but I mean, there's like you can just expand. Like I've mentioned Setimoto previously. Like, I don't have an electric car, but I hate all the paying for parking everywhere.
Mhm.
Because like I travel a lot, I travel way too much with my car, so I have 7 different parking apps that I needed to install because you don't have change. The parking spot is in the middle of nowhere, so you need to pay with a credit card, and they have an app that 3 kids developed in their garage for their uncle that runs the parking spot. So like, that could all be trivially solved with Lightning. Like if you just imagine what it takes for you to like create an application that handles credit cards, get Stripe or some other payment processors in the back, and then you have chargebacks, etc. And also you're charging tiny amounts. So instead, you can have a unified way to pay for this, or on the other hand, you can be a company that provides this service in a way that you have the business relations with, I don't know, every parking application in Europe, and you're doing a B2B deal, and your customers are actually people who want to park, and you settle with the end company in fiat. Like you don't need to orange pill the actual vendor. You can just provide a service that solves the problems for the users. And because the way Lightning is done, you can maybe create a business model out of it. It's cheaper, it's faster, it enables you to capture a bigger market because you have smaller payments, etc., etc. So maybe people park for 15 minutes because they couldn't before and wouldn't park there and things like that.
Yeah, we did have, as you were talking about it, I remembered we had one project called Arian. I think they did pretty well with, I think they were one of the winners for our first early hackathons. And it was, or it is, a parking kind of app, like how you're describing. The project is being worked on, or was worked on, by the ATL BitLab, the folks in Atlanta there, Brian, Stefan, and a few others. It's open source, I believe. So if anyone wants to jump on this project, they could search for Arian in the Arian parking on Bolt.FUN, and it could be it could be a cool project. Like Aljaz said, it's the possibility to solve these cash flow and payment flow problems, and paying for things on demand. I think we leave it there. This was amazing. Actually, no, we don't leave it there. I would like to get from you, Aljaz. Would you like to give a message to the makers, the builders out there before we sign off?
Well, build some cool shit.
There we go. Build some cool shit. From the Bitcoin Chad himself, that hunk of a man, Aljaz, thank you so much for joining us and dropping those wisdom bombs.
Well,
Take
till
care,
next
everyone.
time. Bye.
Till next time.